So, Squato, you had something to say?
Yes, and just to make sure people are aware, this is an international international podcast, which is coming from people from America, people from the UK, people from the United States of America. England. People from the United States of America, people from Australia, and people from that country just north of Mexico.
What?
Yeah, he made reference 3 times. Okay, so Killerfish, you had. Let's start with you. You had a couple you wanted to review. Let's start with one of them.
Let's start off with one which has become sort of a personal favourite here, Bad Guy High. Now, this is found on Drunk Dark, which provides web space for webcomics. What it's basically about is it's superheroes, only it's supervillains in high school. And one of them becomes a superhero while still being a supervillain.
Okay.
Shock and horror.
Yep. It parodies so many lovable DC and Marvel characters in a really, really amusing and clever way. Let's see. There are the two main characters are Ethan, who's Evan, who's sort of a technological genius type person, and his best friend Dan. And Dan gets bitten by a radioactive Superman, and thus gains all the powers of Superman.
Does he get the suck too?
No. The question is, does he... okay, never mind. It's a really... I'm going to stop there, because I don't want to go there again, like we did last time. Okay, so what's the URL for that, Killerfish?
I really like this comic, as I said, because of all the parodying. And I mean, it also develops the characters along in a intelligent and witty way, which, is always fun. So that's why I'm recommending this one to anybody who wants to read it. Hang on, I'll just read out the URL if you'd like me to.
That will work.
Okay, www.drunkduck.com/bad_guy_high. And that's it. That would be the URL for the webcomic. Read, enjoy, review, don't hit me in the head.
While we're talking about Drunk Duck, I just wanted to say that I understand what Drunk Duck was trying to do, but they're kind of the example of what Tom from a couple episodes back was talking about, how not to build a community around webcomics. They kind of force the webcomic artist into a particular template. Now, that being said, they do have very good hosting, which means that they're unlikely to be down. Anyways, that's
unlike, say, Comic Genesis.
That's just an aside. That's my opinion. Squato, why don't we go with your first review next?
First review, Two Kinds. Figured may as well be good enough. Sorry, just going to pull up the URL real quick. Got it. Two Kinds. Probably one of those comics which people should already know about. Seems like everyone's either read it or has heard about it nowadays. For those that haven't, basic rundown, if you wanted it, would be that it's a fantasy type comic with humans who have magic versus a subgroup of other races who technically would be classified as anthro races, and who also have magic, and another creature with another race which doesn't. And yeah, it's kind of basic. For me, I've enjoyed it because it does actually have some good ideas to throw in with the fantasy tropes. How it acts. Yeah, sorry, it's a bit too early in the morning for me to be really thinking too hard.
It's a bit too early in the day.
Well, let me ask you this. I did start reading it, and I do really appreciate the art style. It's pretty good.
And it really grows better too.
Yes. My own personal take on the art style is It's just a little bit too precious moments for the serious subject matter they're addressing.
Yeah, it's very anime inspired.
No, this is Precious Moments inspired. This is Big Eyes Beyond Big, just really ramming it into way too cute for Hello Kitty territory. Maybe it's just the parent in me, but I see Precious Moments all over this comic, and it's like too much sugar.
Never heard of Precious Moments before.
For shame. Look it up. You'll understand the instant you see it. But yeah, for those who have not heard of Precious Moments, think the big eye, big head meme from anime, and just make it as extreme as possible. And that's Precious Moments. So go look it up if you're interested. It's really kind of disturbing.
And then start talking about how there is a racial hatred between the two different races in it, and then you've got two kinds.
Right, which actually brings me back to my primary question to Squato about Two Kinds. Did they ever start going somewhere with the story?
Yeah, they had a big event took place. Actually, they've had a couple of events. It did take a while for things to really start moving. It's in about almost the 800 mark with comics. And at the moment, they've got a big event another big event. I'm trying to not give it too much plot details, that's why I say big event. Another big event. Blows up. Yeah. Well, technically speaking, that's what's almost happening from what looks to be from what's shown.
I was just guessing.
Okay, so tell us why you think people should go out and read this, because my time is precious. So enlighten me.
Yes, you have precious moments.
Yes, I do. I have many precious moments. Will you just review the comic?
It's good.
Okay.
It's basically, as I said, if you like Anthro type thing, this is, and I say that because it seems everyone that knows this seems to like that. Even ones that hate Anthro seem to like this one. So, and if you like fantasy, we don't mind it. There's something for you. Storytelling can be a bit slow at times, but that doesn't matter, and it can be very fan servicey. And this guy does seem to.
A webcomic with Anthros being fan servicey? No, surely not. You're jesting.
A little too much.
Right,
dial it back just a little bit. Okay, what's the URL for Two Kinds?
It's a very hard one to remember. It's http blah 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 twokinds.com.
So
there is
blah,
no
blah,
www.
Blah. I'm not getting anything. Blah.
The TWOKINDS, right?
2. No, the number 2, and then kinds.
Okay.
Unlike previous times, the archives are actually hosted on this comics website.
Okay. I'll go ahead and hop into the first of the comics that I wanted to review this week. Anybody who sits down and talks with me at any depth will know that I am a huge fan of Ranma 1/2 and Sailor Moon. And the comic I'm reviewing actually combines the two.
You're not talking about... You're not Sailor Ranko?
Yes, I am.
The comic which hasn't been hit by the
I'm too manly to
infringement yet.
Like a cited schoolgirl, but rest assured that is what I would be doing.
Squato,
actually, Mike,
your talking made no sense and overlapped Killerfish. So, Killerfish, you first, then Squato.
As I said, I'm too manly to squeal like an excited little schoolgirl, but rest assured that's what I would be doing.
Yeah, Squato, go.
The comic which hasn't been hit by a copyright infringement notice yet.
Yes. So you two are at least somewhat familiar with it. I think the reason it hasn't been hit with any infringement notices is because the art is not all that good. Just as a personal aside,
and you just offended so many people on DA when you made that comment.
It's not that good. There's no spatialization. It's very warped in certain places. The coloring's great. Don't get me wrong, and you can definitely tell which character is which. It's not that good an art style. Now it's improving, like most webcomics. As time goes on, it goes from not all that great to better, and hopefully by the time they get to the I'll talk about that in a minute. But hopefully it continues to improve at the pace it's improving, because I really see the art style getting to the point where it could be really, really nice.
It's probably just going to be like this for a long time.
Let me have my fantasy.
I'm here to kill your dreams.
You mean the one where you're a Sailor Senshi, or the other one?
Shut up. Okay, so by way of personal note, sort of an aside, I happen to know the person who is we'll call him producer of the Sailor Renko comic, and that's actually kind of there needs to be a little bit of history there. Sailor Renko was originally just a fanfic posted to, I believe, the fanfiction mailing list way, way back in the 90s. And it was considered to be really, really good, if a bit warm and fuzzy. There was some Sailor Moon characters missing. It didn't really address some of the Ranma 1/2 characters all that well, and committed what is today considered to be the cardinal sin of Ranma 1/2 fan fiction, that is basing the anime as canon instead of the manga as canon. At this point, at this point, if you write a Ranma 1/2 fanfic with the anime being the canon source, you're going to get lambasted because everybody considers the manga at this point to be the canon source, which is, in my opinion, how it should be. Well, a couple other authors picked up in the aftermath of Sailor Renko. They just got inspired. One of which is a person named Rebecca Heinemann. There's some story there. I'm not going to go into that, but Rebecca, aka Burger Heinemann, incidentally, a game developer, worked on the Bard's Tale series and is currently working at Microsoft in their XNA software development department. You know all her secrets. Hey, I know her well. Well, probably better than a lot of people who think they know her. Anyways, she picked it up and started writing what, in my opinion, is probably the biggest sea change to what has been called the Fukufic ever. I mean, there was the original Ranma becomes a Sailor Senshi fanfic, which spawned the entire genre, but it started getting really stale until Rebecca Heinemann came along and wrote Tunnel Vision as an add-on to the Sailor Renko series. And Tunnel Vision incorporated not just Sailor Moon and Ranma, but also elements of Terminator, with Skynet being the big bad. And then,
come with me if you want to die.
And then,
or insert whatever joke you want.
It's actually really, really good. And then followed that up with
Twice in a Millennium.
No, that was Twice Millennium was before Rebecca got into the act, but after the original story. Twice in a Millennium was a one-shot that followed up on the Sailor Renko fanfic. Anyways, the point is that Rebecca Heinemann really built on the story and kind of made it her own. And the original author said, "Yeah, I may have written the original story, but Rebecca Heinemann consider her the authority on it. So it kind of got passed off to Rebecca, and then Rebecca started fishing around for somebody who could possibly do some artwork for it. Well, around that time, I had read the series and I thought, this is really, really good. And me and some friends of mine and I were trying to, I repeated myself. We were trying to start up an animation studio. It never really went anywhere, and that's another story in itself. But through that animation studio and us looking for stories to animate, I contacted Rebecca and said, hey, your stuff is really good. We're trying to find some source material. Do you mind if... And that's how we wound up meeting. And one of my artist friends did some concept art, and that kind of became the launching point for some of the artwork that you'll see in the comic. The comic is about, in case you hadn't guessed, Ranma of Ranma 1/2. His girl side turns out to be the reincarnation of a unknown sailor's son from the Silver Millennium. The reason she's unknown,
as it happens,
is because Queen Serenity posthumously granted Sailor's son Sailor Scout status because of heroic deeds, dying in the line of battle, and all that kind of thing.
As you do.
Indeed. And as a result, when Queen Serenity sent she forward in time to be reborn in the 20th century, or 21st if you go by, if you're hearing this in a couple of years, it just happened to catch up the spirit of Sailor's son from that time, and reborn as Ranma, splash and dunk of Spring of Drowned Girl, and instant Sailor's son, so to speak. And,
for fun, add water.
And the webcomic is still in the middle of the original Sailor Ranko story. And one thing I've got to say, if you've read the Sailor Ranko story, it's still worth reading the Sailor Ranko comic.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Yes, absolutely. Because Rebecca goes back and cleans up the missing senshi from the original story, or explaining this which wasn't properly explained except in this other side story that was related but not part of the continuation that Rebecca did. It really cleans up the whole thing, and best part in my opinion, the humor and the writing still continue with the same kind of wacky zaniness that you expect from the original Ranma 1/2 manga. It really is a good sort of alternate universe divergence comic from the manga. And if the URL is www.sailorranko.com, that's RANKO. Okay, so any questions?
I should make it clear that's in my. It's. I'm just watching it to see how bad this gets. The pile. I'm not the only bunny that has that comic in that pile.
Okay.
There's a few reasons why it's in that regard. I'm not going to have the time to cover them.
Squato no baka!
Sound effect fail. Killerfish.
Yeah.
Why don't you go on to your second comic?
My second comic would be a nice little comic I stumbled upon last week called Emergency Exit.
I'm taking that right now.
Yes, take note. Take note. Basically, it's about a group of people who live in a block of apartments, who one of whom has a interdimensional portal in his cupboard.
Makes perfect sense.
I like it already.
Yep. Strange things happen. One of them's completely and utterly nuts. Who invents things like shrink rays and growth rays and stuff like that. And the coolness enhancer. You heard me right. The coolness enhancer. You put it on something and it makes it cooler.
Hey.
The fonts. What?
It starts off with very, very anime / manga style of artwork, but it gets really much better in artwork terms. The story is enjoyable to read. Characters develop nicely, even though they haven't developed much because it's of webcomic time compressed together. You understand what I mean?
No, we don't.
Oh, well,
Right.
the rule is, in webcomics, any period of time passing takes longer than in the real world.
Such as Elgun Shive.
Yes, that's an excellent example. I mean, through Elgun Shive, we've had, 1-2 months have passed since the first comic in the comics, from the comic time point of view.
And meanwhile, it's been like 8 years.
I should point out that point works more best if they don't actually reference which time period it's meant to be set in. Because I can't think of the comic that was done a few years ago, and the guy actually did. And when the longer it got away from the year it was set in, the harder it was for him to make any references to it that worked, so he just threw it in. I can't think of the comic, but I know that story's well known.
I think I remember.
Tip for people that want to do comics.
Yeah, vaguely, I recall what you're talking about, but not enough detail to be able to recall exactly what you're talking about. Anyways, go on, Killerfish.
Well, as I was saying, it has a couple of crossovers with some other comics, which actually makes it interesting because it's got the whole interdimensional portal in the cupboard thing. And it's just a nice little comic. Well, little. It's probably bigger than my comic. But, yeah, I enjoyed it.
Size matters.
I think anybody who reads EGS would find it nice little comic to read.
And
Keep calling it little. Hit me over the head.
And the URL for that?
The URL for that is quite simply eecomics.net.
Alrighty. Killerfish.
Yes.
Or, not Killerfish. I keep doing that. Squato.
Killerfish Part 2.
Yes.
The Reckoning.
No,
The return.
The return of Reckoning. Go ahead with your second review.
I should point out these two comics that I'm reviewing, that I pulled up here, these are the ones I said a couple of weeks back, and these are ones which have been recommended previously by others. They said, why don't I review these? So that's why they're in here. I'm partly making that point because the second one, which is Foxfire Chronicles, yes, it is another Anthro comic, and if anyone wants to write angry letters, which I'm going to ignore, just making that point clear, that's why.
Yes, I'm pretty sure that everybody is aware that you like Fox Girls and things which are vaguely Anthro related.
Squato likes Fox Girls? Say
Right.
this is so.
Two more.
It isn't so.
names for the list. Done.
So go on.
Underline said names. Okay. Short version of it is... You know what? It's really hard one to actually give a short version of.
We'll start with the
It's setting is it's meant to be a few. Technically speaking, how can I put it? You know the term 20 minutes into the future? That basically would describe it. It's 20 odd minutes into the future, and there is. You know what, bugger? I'll just say that give off what happens in the first 50 comics. It's about the 500 comic mark now, so yeah, like that's really going to matter. It starts off with some people that are at a bar. They get captured by a group from the US government, who then, yeah, and as you do, you get experimented on with weird drugs and and amongst other things, and they get turned into, as it turns out, Anthros. as they do.
Shock horror.
I could psychoanalyze that and go around. Go on.
I should make a point here. This all happened about all the first 10 comics that sort of explored this. From this point on, there was a change in the comic. Originally, there was an artist and a writer. The writer dropped off after the first 10 comics, and the artist has taken over completely the rest of the series from then on. So everything since then has been completely his ideas.
Okay.
The story itself is that these people get experimented on by this group, or the US, in the US Army, in the US various other departments, and then it starts to be made clear is that the people that are in charge of that are actually working against other parts of the US government who have their own plans and are working for other organisations.
Like
and
the
then
United States Department of Anthros.
Right. Well, technically it's the UN group for the Anthros, because there is a species.
Actually,
Yeah, it's-
given the state of bureaucracy in the U.S. government, I would not be terribly surprised if we wound up with the U.S. Department of Anthros, even though they don't technically exist. Small minor technicality there. Go on.
Yeah, so basically they've got all these things going on. As it turns out, there's a huge amount of backstory that's coming together because it's considered a time of prophecy coming at the moment, and it's where one of the people that's that got selected for this. It turns out he's meant to be the one that's going to hold the fate of the world's. Yes, right. He's going. What the hell was that last sound?
Okay, go on.
Yeah, it's going to hold the fate of the world in balance, and the ones that he's going to hold it against, because he actually has to hold it against, is the three main sides that are being represented there. And it does have some pretty good scenes there, particularly one where they've got this ninja guy that turns out to be the US president.
Which one?
The one for the comic that actually, well, it's 20 minutes in the future, it's a white guy, and he's actually a good US president. So, not Bush!
Well, it wouldn't be Clinton either.
No!
You can tell this is devolving into fantasy realms here.
Well, currently he's in a fantasy arc at the moment. I should point out, this is actually a serious comic. Although, as they're laughing, it is kind of easy to make fun of the elements of it, just like you can with any story. But this comes out pretty good.
Okay, so what's the URL?
Hey, I'm not laughing at it. I'm just making witty empathy comments about it all the time.
So what's the URL for that?
There's two URLs. There's the Comic Genesis site, which is foxfire.comicgenesis.com. It's the
up.
older site. It's still up. It still updates. But when it comes to which section, the links and some of the bios and things like that and the abouts, they give updates referencing earlier stuff in the comic and some of the characters, whereas if you look at the other site, which is www. You can try and pronounce this one. ARIANNIA.
That was AA at the end?
No, just IA.
Oh, IA. .com?
Yep.
Ariania.
Something along those lines. Yeah, that one, the information there, the bio's information that it's nothing on the cast members. All the information there is on the individual races that make up the greater universe, and the plot itself there is a lot of detail on it. It's meant to stretch back about a couple of 100,000 years.
A couple 100,000 years. I'm not even that ambitious usually.
The idea is that you've got older races which did things, they collapsed, but people believed something of importance from what that civilization did, and they continue on, and there's people that are fighting for the ideals of that race or to recapture and rebuild that civilization. That's gone.
I see.
Whereas others make the point, it's gone for a good reason.
Okay, so let's move on to the next one. I'm going to review Gunnerkrigg Court. This is, at least as far as I know, one of the lesser heard of comics. Mostly, if I were to try to pin a reason on it, it's a little bit eclectic. The art style, the storytelling, some of the plot points, and there's a lot that is not revealed even when they're doing some sort of big reveal. If you are really into mystery of various sorts, if you're into intrigue, if you like characters with really hideously complex backgrounds that only get revealed a piece at a time, Gunnerkrigg Court's the one you want to read. To give you an idea about Gunnerkrigg Court, imagine modern-day England, and kind of like Harry Potter, there's this other magical world, but instead of being intentionally segregated and hidden, it's intentionally segregated and we're right there out in the open.
Harrods.
I'm sorry?
Harrods. Sorry, if you're English, you'd find that hilariously funny. Harrods is a huge shop in London. But never mind.
Okay.
I'll just be quiet now.
It's not quite modern day, as would be implied by the fact that there's quite a bit of magical and fantasy elements to it, in that there's certain aspects of it that are extremely high-tech, and there's other aspects of it that would imply that there's development that's been held back in certain areas. There's also a lot of magic that gets thrown around. The main character, and I'll be darned if I can remember her name. She is the daughter of somebody who worked at the school as, well, I won't spoil it too much, but somebody who worked at the school that she has been sent to. Her mother, however, has died, and I can't remember what happens to her father.
He gets eaten by a giant hamster.
We'll go with that. No. That's it. Antimony. Annie for short. She meets a girl named Kat, but it's not for, I want to say 10, 12 comics that happens. But there's also other minor characters that you really, really start to be interested in them. Like there's another student at the school. I'm trying to remember her name. But she's got these eyes that are like inky black, and there's stuff dripping from them. But people treat her like any other, member of the student body. And
yes, because people with inky black eyes are really common over here in England at the moment.
Well, you find out that there's a reason for the inky black eyes. But like I said, it's just one of those things where this particular character has this incredibly complex backstory that at first you're all, what the hell's with her eyes? But then you're all, wow, I hope she's okay with whatever happens. And you start to realize that the way her eyes are is just sort of symptomatic of part of her backstory. It's incredibly in-depth, incredibly involved. If you like the Harry Potter series, chances are you're going to like this comic. If you don't like the Harry Potter series, you're probably not going to like this comic for the same reason.
Okay.
The URL is www.gunnerkrigg, that's GUNNERKRIGG.com.
It's not the Gogomobile.
What?
The way you spelled that at first, it's a reference to an older ad. Australians would get it.
Okay.
Yes, we're doing all
Then it
sorts of
turns a
metahuman
reference to an yes, especially obscure cars.
Oh,
all sorts of meta humour we'd only get ourselves.
Yes. Okay.
G-O.
Okay, so having done those reviews, there is... The next section would normally be listener Q&A. However, we're not doing that this week. Ask me why.
Why?
Because the few questions that did get posted did not follow the rules. And while we would be normally more than happy to read off those questions, just to reemphasize, anybody who posts a question to the podcast forums on shastrix.com does need to post each individual question to its own thread. Otherwise, it's not going to get answered. So we invite whomever posted, and it was an anonymous poster, so we don't know who it was. But we do invite them to repost their questions individually to their own thread on the shastrix.com forums for this podcast.
And then we'll maybe answer them.
Maybe. No, we'll answer them. We'll be nice about it.
Okay.
Okay,
but I don't want to be nice.
Yeah, you do.
I want to be evil.
Every time you try to be evil, it winds up being nice.
I know, I'm such a good person at heart.
He's a Jesus
that
Hitler.
time I gave that baby candy.
You're just hopeless, man.
As I said, Killerfish is the Jesus Hitler.
Heil to me, heil to myself. Oh, how does that sound? Anyways. So, all right. So, just to recap, we talked a little bit about Comic-Con. Get yourself registered if you're planning on registering. As a side note, volunteers will usually always be welcomed, although as you get closer and closer to it, chances are they're going to be less and less open to volunteers, so get yourself registered and pre-registered as a volunteer. And no, you cannot register or pre-register or anything like that at the door for either being a volunteer or just getting into the con, so do it in advance. Killerfish, stop chewing on your cookies.
But they're so cookie and delicious like.
I'll keep an ear open for our upcoming Battlestar Galactica episode as soon as I manage to get my button gear to watch the show. Killerfish, are you up to date on that, or do you need to watch it as well?
I probably will go watch it.
Okay, you go ahead and watch it then.
Fail.
No, that wasn't fail. That was funny. The webcomics we reviewed today are Bad Guy High, Two Kinds, Sailor Ranko, Emergency Exit, Foxfire Chronicles, and Gunner Craig Court. Just as a reminder, this podcast is brought to you by the good folks at Shastrix.com.
Shastrix.com.
They are still looking eagerly for people to host their webcomic and other projects. So contact
begging
them.
even.
Killerfish, what's the status on your comic endeavors?
Currently I'm in a spate of writing because I've never really done serious writing before, so I'm just getting into the habit of actually planning out my stories before I draw them.
Gasp.
As I said, the France is invaded because the world's come to an end.
Let's see, Squato, you wanted to do a quick review of a video game?
Yeah, recently they had the expansion for World in Conflict came out. It's called Soviet Assaults. For those people who are unaware, it's basically an alternative Cold War, but it's set in the 80s and based on realistic studies conducted and also some real history and all things like that. Short version is, in the mid-80s, the Soviet Union didn't show signs of collapse. The hardliners remained in power, and then when they didn't have any food, they went for the West saying, give us what you've got, No one gave it to them, and then they invade. As you do.
This Cold War just got hot.
Actually, I love the reference for the one in the expansion pack. They said Red Dawn for when they start the invasion. Red Dawn is actually a reference to that movie from the 80s. If you know that movie, if you don't, I really recommend you watch it. Particularly because they're meant to remake that, and it's a hilarious propagandist piece.
Okay.
Yeah, basically, as I said, it's Cold War continues, and Europe goes to a hellbasket but stays around, and because the war got to a stalemate, Russia decides to throw a spanner in the works by invading Seattle.
Okay.
It's unrealistic but fun, and it's actually quite a good game.
Okay, well, thank you, Squato. Just as a reminder, I will be updating the owner's website on a continuous basis. You can keep an eye on when I'm updating it. If you happen to have a Facebook account, my iWeb happens to update Facebook whenever I update the site. So you can see when I'm updating if you go to my Facebook page there.
And that's just made me remember something of interest with the comic, with EGS at the moment. It's now on Twitter.
Just as a reminder, the comic that brought us all together, El Gunashive, go read off and read early. And that's it. Killerfish, last words?
Well, I bust the case after
Squato, translation.
I have tasted the moon men.
That's it. Good night, everybody.
Night.
I need you here to keep some sanity. We are but pawns in a faded game of cat and mouse. Maybe a couple of headshots thrown out here and there. This crazy world is all messed up, all in my hair. I've got you, I don't care. But now all that I want is just to be your man. It's a crazy world, in a twisted turn of reality. It's you and me, and I need you here to keep some sanity. We are but pawns in a faded game of cat and mouse. Maybe a couple of guinea pigs thrown out here and there. This crazy world is all messed up in my head. I got you, I don't care.